Sure, I can do that. So the full title of the play is a public reading of an unproduced screenplay about the death of Walt Disney by Lucas Hnath, who is all over the place right now. He has his two big popular plays are The Christians and A Doll's House Part 2, which won the Tony last year for Best New Play. And in general, the play is an exploration of sort of the myth behind Walt Disney and what Walt Disney has become in sort of the American media canon at this point, and really exploring the other side of his legacy that the public doesn't really know so much about. Parts of the play are fictionalized and parts of the play are very much real. But a lot of what Hnath touches on, I think, are things that Walt would probably prefer to stay in the closet for the most part. But
sure. So
yeah.
The reason why I was kind of drawn to this was I wrote a book called Dark Side Disney. I've always been very interested in Walt Disney. Actually, I'm a huge admirer of Walt Disney, just as an innovator, a genius, but he's still a man.
Right.
And I think this play maybe goes more into the being a human being part than the innovator. As he's telling it, as he's talking to the audience in the play, that's all he wants to talk about, right?
Right.
Is how he's a genius, how he's an innovator, how he's a great guy, how everyone likes him. But the playwright is not, that's not what he's going.
No, and Walt, he has a quote that goes, to paraphrase him, goes something like, I smoke, Walt Disney doesn't smoke. I drink, Walt Disney doesn't drink. And that's, as you know, it's sort of how he lived his life. He had who he was, but a very public persona that he put on. And this play really deals with how he treated his family and people close to him behind that mask that he puts on.
Okay, so let's do a quick reset. I'll cut and cut. Can we go around and introduce, let everyone introduce themselves?
You want us talking to you or to the camera?
Go ahead and talk to the camera.
Great. My name is Shea. I'm one of the co-directors of the piece.
My name is Meghan Stanton. I'm an ensemble member here and I play Walt Disney's daughter in the show.
My name is Abigail Caddy. I'm a dramaturg to this show.
My name is Poch. I play Ron Miller.
And my name is Diem. I'm also an ensemble member here at Single Carrot, and I played Walt Disney.
I'm Leonard Kinsey. You guys know that already. All right, so one of my main questions, the first thing I want to ask is, so I believe the play was written in 2013 and was produced in New York for the first time?
Yeah, it's been produced a few times before this.
So I've heard about it, obviously, being what I'm into, there's rumblings about it, but I don't know that I've known anyone who actually saw the play. I didn't get to New York to see it. So I was really excited when I found out you guys were doing this, but it's kind of obscure. Like, why? Why did you decide to pick this play out of the millions of plays that you could have done and do this one?
Well, we read several of Lucas Hnath's plays over the past few years. It was kind of like a playwright that we were very interested in. He hadn't quite broken yet, and we were very interested in him, but we hadn't found the right play. He wrote a really interesting play called Hillary and Clinton that was about the 2008 election that we read for season planning 2 years ago. We just hadn't found the right thing, but one of our committee members, Dustin Morris, was just obsessed with him, and he just was churning in a new Lucas Hnath script every year. And then this one hit, and I remember we read it at the retreat, where we go to replay the review for the season, And it was just, we all were kind of like, I think it's pretty clear we're gonna do this play. Like, it just was, it's just sitting in that room and reading it, we were like, this is really interesting. It speaks to men in power in a way that's particularly interesting in 2017 at that point, but 2018 now. And I to me, that was like sort of that feeling I was like, okay, we're gonna do this play. Like, that's just gonna happen. And then it just became sort of very much what our whole season came about, was looking at these, big mythical characters in completely new ways. And kind of became very much the linchpin of the season, I think.
Yeah, and to add to that, single carrot theater in general, one of our tenets of our mission statement is to champion new and underproduced work. So we're often looking for, even if it's something that's been performed once or twice, something that people haven't heard of, or that hasn't been done 100 times, already. And so that often means that we're sort of digging in, trying to find playwrights that we think are about to, break out onto the mainstream, and that happened with Lucas Hnath right as this season started. But we try to make it a point to do this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and we were already, like Paul was saying, we had already kind of decided as a company that we were going to do this show, and it was sort of nice that everything with Lucas Hnath kind of took off last year, but this was a play that really fit with our overall theme this season of looking at the other side of not only public figures, but issues that have been going on. So it fit really nicely.
I was going to ask, because obviously there's awareness of the Me Too movement. Powerful males being in charge of their...
Yeah, so this play was chosen in we read it in February as a whole ensemble, and we actually chose to do it was late April, early May. And right after that was when Dallas House 2 broke out, and it became it. But really, the big public media figures in the Me Too movement and all at that all kind of, it broke after we'd already decided to do the show. And so it just became, oh, well, obviously we chose the right play when we chose it this spring. Like this was something, it was sort of a cultural movement we were feeling. But all of the Weinstein stuff and all that had not yet happened. But it certainly, I know for you guys as directors, took on a whole new way.
Sure. Well, what I think is really nice about this play and this production in particular is, as we progressed in the production process, the rehearsal process, things from the time we chose it to now, it just sort of kept building in its relevance today. First with the election and the rise of Donald Trump in general. We found a lot of parallels with the Walt's personality in this play and his, and then of course the Me Too movement, everything with Weinstein and the general fallout of people's terrible things being brought to light in the media. All of that for us, myself and Genevieve DeMai, the other director of the piece and the artistic director of our company, for us it just reinforced why this was the time to do this and make sure that this sort of play and this sort of story was being told.
Cool. Yeah, it was pretty refreshing. Just got right on top. So you sent me the script. I started reading it. I was like, I don't want to read it. I want to hear this script. I want to see it. So you talking about your retreat went on when you guys first pulled out the script. Did you guys just start going back and forth and doing the lines? Or?
Yeah, well, so just our process is that we read plays as part of the play reading committee. We decided this is going to move on for everyone to read. So we'd all already read it on our own. And then, our process is everybody gets a role and does it, and then
Just kind of get it on its
So
feet.
it wasn't like you just all came up and just got the script all at once. You'd all read it.
we'd all read it already.
So-
we vetted it.
Why I'm bringing this up is because the script has a very interesting pattern of speech. Where Walt is essentially directing his own play, and he says cut when he doesn't want anything to. When he wants to stop someone from talking, or when he wants to shift the scene, he'll say cut, he'll say close up on me, he'll say fade, and the dialogue is interspersed very rhythmically, like almost word for word in some places. Like one actor says one word, one actor says another. It really is like jazz almost, but obviously not improv. So how long did it take you guys to get that rhythm down?
It was torture. It was I've been acting for more than 20 years, and it was the first time I've ever been at all concerned about learning lines, and it was to the point where I was headphones in my ear, listening to the script 4 hours a day, just because because if it gets off for a second, it's a huge problem. And so, since early December, until last week, and a couple times since, I got to the point where Matt and Debbie said to me, you have to stop running your lines, so that you can actually act in the show. You're so obsessed with it right now, and it's taking over your entire being. I remember you guys gave me you may not work on lines at all for the next 24 hours. You have to stop. Because it was so challenging. I don't know. It
was following a day off where you were like, yeah, I spent 8 hours looking at the script, and then I listened to it, and we were like, yeah, tomorrow you can't do that.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah, it's because it was a particular challenge. I don't know, for you guys, you guys know the script from listening to it.
Yeah, we, Ron and I, as characters, we sort of are present on stage for the entire show, but don't speak nearly as much as Paul, and the actor who plays his brother Roy really have to have the whole play memorized word for word, because that's how it goes. But it is interesting how the style sort of takes over your life. People say a word and it's a word from the script, and I'm running 10 lines forward in my head, or I just say it out loud. I mean, it's crazy, and it just affects your speech patterns. It's it bleeds into your real life because it's so intense the way that the script has to be handled.
And learning to memorize it is because most scripts they follow a pattern or something they fit together pieces of a jigsaw puzzle.
They logically.
Yeah, they logically follow. But with this, you just have to rote memorize it. You can't there's no other option.
Now, I should say you have the script sitting in front of you. There is not a chance in hell with the speed that this thing's going that you're going to be. That's of no use, basically. Right?
Well,
am I right?
Actually, it's not really the script.
No, it's not. I didn't look at it. So at the end, you blow it all out, and the pages are littering the floor.
We felt pretty strongly if we put the actual script on the table, it would be a distraction for the actual lines to be there. So it's actually it's a prop script. It's fake. It's actually, if you look closely at it, it's just the chorus from When You Wish Upon a Star over and over again.
And just assigned to different characters.
Okay, cool. So to go along, to continue this thread, so you've got the dialogue to contend with, but you're also playing real people who have real ways of speaking and acting and moving. How focused? So I didn't get the impression that you were imitating Walt. I didn't get the impression that you were imitating Roy or Diane. That didn't occur to me that you guys were doing a shtick. So what was the decision there?
Well, the first thing, I think Abby should talk a lot about this, because really, as a dramaturg, Abby provided us with all the context. But I'll say, from my perspective, what I chose to look at exclusively was things about Disney put out by the Disney company. So that I didn't watch any video or anything that was about him or how he was not good or whatever. It was only the propaganda, right? And I didn't want to try to do an impression of his voice or anything, and just played it the way the rhythm of the script dictated for me. But I'd say a lot of it, really, the rest of the stuff came from you, Abby, if you want to talk about.
So I did a lot of research about Walt himself, his life, his biography. He had a timeline and more breakout kind of information, just so everyone knew what was fact and what Lucas Hnath had fudged or made up, because it's difficult to tell in the script itself what is factually true and what's not. So we have a lot of audience members after the show who are Googling, was Walt frozen? Which is satisfying. But that information I just provided to the actors so they could do with it what they wanted, what they needed.
On the Frozen thing, I had one of my best audience lead-in things today was there was a guy wearing a Red Sox hat, and I said to him, Red Sox, Ted Williams and I have some very similar interests. Because of course Ted Williams was actually cryogenically frozen. And it took him a second, he was like, it took a second. And I think that was a good one. That was good. Yeah.
So let's continue that. So there are a lot of things in this play that are blatantly false. there are a lot of things that are kind of half true, and then there are a lot of things that are true. And there's really no way for an uninformed audience member to know what is what. I mean, my opinion is people are going to accept it all as true. And they're going to walk out of here, and if they don't Google it, if they don't look on their phones, they're going to go home and be like, wow, Walt Disney was an asshole. And he got frozen, what a dumb thing to do. Now, and you got to figure this is someone who people grew up looking up to and thinking that this Uncle Walt and someone very respected. It's a little slanderous. What do you guys think about that from a moral perspective?
We've talked a lot about this.
Yeah. You had a really interesting point earlier today about what you said about Roy.
Yeah, so what's interesting is a lot of people have had that reaction or have said things along the lines of, he's not here to defend himself, and it takes on this ethical gray area. But really, what I said earlier to Paul is, if this play is slanderous to anyone, in my opinion, actually it's Roy Disney, who every bad idea, every bad thing, all these things that sort of are populated in the script comes from Roy. He's the one who has these ideas, and Walt puts the blame on him and sort of all this, but really all that this play accuses Walt Disney of being is like kind of a jerk. But people do have a lot of trouble with that, reconciling that with this image that they have of him as Uncle Walt. But it has been, people are very attached to their own images of Walt Disney.
And I think it sort of relates to what we were talking about a second ago with how since things like Harvey Weinstein and all these news stories have come to light, and the reaction, like with Kevin Spacey, for example, it's very hard to accept for a lot of people because he's a beloved figure. I think that's exactly what's happening to some extent with this, some of these reactions. And you're right, there are things that are in the play that aren't true. He wasn't really frozen, as a big one. But I think the takeaway there is sort of what you were talking about earlier. There are different sides to everybody that we show publicly and that we don't. And it's fairly well documented that he wasn't always the easiest person to get to know or work with. And sure, this play takes it to a dramatically interesting level, but that's, I think at the end of the day, what Lucas Hnath wanted to do is bring out the other side of somebody who is beloved. And you should know some of the things that happened behind the scenes.
And I don't think, like, it never came across as like a hit piece to me.
No.
Like, it's not like he set out to like break. I don't think he was ever attacking the person Walt Disney lived. He was attacking the mythos. He was attacking the legend, the idea of Walt Disney. And I think he tried to do it by like leveraging his own mythology against him. Like, say like, oh yeah, everyone thought you were this great guy. We're like, but let's flip that on its head.
Right.
Yeah, and I think, I'm sure you encountered this in writing your book, and I think Abby can probably talk about it more, but I think part of what's interesting is that because the Disney Corporation, the Disney company, has made such an effort to sanitize the history of the company, it's hard to parse what's true and what's not. And so they themselves sort of, by trying to create this picture-perfect history of the company, make it hard for people to figure out when a piece like this is written, what's true and what's not, because you can't find the information. And so I think it's sort of, to me, it's like a natural extension of trying to have this beautiful history of Uncle Walt and only the good stuff means that then when the bad stuff comes to light, it's hard to disprove. It's just as hard to prove as it is to disprove.
Yeah, he made Photoshop the cigarettes out of his hand.
Yep.
And tell everyone that he pointed with two fingers because it was rude to point with one finger in other cultures. I mean, so final question, and it comes from that. Did you expect any blowback from the Disney company or from just hardcore Disney fans? Like, I call them pixie dusters. Like, can you imagine someone just standing up and being like,
Well,
fuck you guys?
well, sure, I can imagine it. But I think it's more reasonable for that to happen to this particular production from a fan than it is the company. I mean, we didn't write the play. Lucas Hnath wrote the play at the end of the day. But when at the beginning of every season, we have a little preview for our subscribers, and that was the first question actually. Like, do you expect any action from the Disney company? And we were like, no, not really. It's not ours. We're not creating this out of nothing. But I certainly understand why some fans might be angered by it, but it's kind of like we said, it's because it goes against that image, that sanitized image that they have in their head.
Yeah, and I think that for, at least this is my experience, I love Disney. I love Disney movies, I grew up with them, oh my god, they're the best. But I think there's an interesting generational divide, because I feel like, I'm 26, I have no relationship to Walt Disney the man. Like, when my parents watched Uncle Walt on Sunday nights, I didn't watch any of that. So to me, he's always just sort of been a guy I've seen in black and white photographs. And I think for some people who are, hardcore Disney fans who grew up in the 90s and in this sort of second wave of Disney movies, it's less of a problem. But I think we were not worried, but thinking sort of, it could be that some people are going to get real mad about this, and it hasn't happened yet. But
I think it's something that's interesting is I'm surprised. I mean, I guess this, of course, it always goes back to, it's a funny thing of being an actor and playing a character. You have to believe the character is right? That you have to, because you can't play a character that does things that they know are wrong. Because I think most people aren't like, gee, how can I screw that guy over? Let me make a plan, right? And even if they know they're doing something that's not totally right, they feel justified in it because of some reason. So I have to play Walt as if Walt is the hero of his own story. There's nothing else I can do, right? He just can't do it. But to me, it's like, if you didn't know things that, like, Walt Disney was not this perfect, like, what are you doing? Like, do you actually think this guy was perfect? Like, that he was this saintly character? You don't do what he did and be perfect. Like, there's a line early in the show where, I have to be one of the most important people who's ever lived. What's the point unless you're one of the most important people who's ever lived? And in the end, he kind of was, right? He changed the way we look at entertainment. And I know he wants, or the family and all that, wants to point out this idea that he was this saintly character, but you don't accomplish what he accomplished without the drive that sometimes screws people over. And I think you and I had a discussion very late in the process, Matt, that was, Walt lives his life under the motto of, I have to be one of the most important people who's ever lived. And he honestly believes everyone is on Team Walt. Everyone that he encounters is on the team of helping him be one of the most important people in the world. So if they have to get screwed over for something, well, that's just part of the sacrifice of being on Team Walt. And, it'll get taken care of later. And I think about some of the things in the script of that, Walt, in his mind, when Walt's doing it, he's like, yeah, but I'll fix that later. He just never does. Because he does, right? But that in his mind, because again, I don't think you can play him like he's like, I'm sinister, or, I'm all this stuff. But in fact, it's a trap you can very easily fall into. So to me, if people are like, it's like, a hit piece, to use your thing, I'm like, it's not, right? He's power hungry, he's driven, he's excited.
And brilliant.
And not nice to his brother, right? Like, and also, what media mogul is not those things? Like, you just don't do it. And it's like, someone would be shocked if, George Lucas was, came up that he was, of course he is, of course George Lucas screws people, like everyone does, like that's part of the deal. It's different because he's Uncle Walt, and everyone grew up, many people grew up on him, or the legacy of him 30 years later, or 25 years later when Beauty and the Beast came out, which is the first Disney movie I recall watching. I'm sure I saw Dumbo before that, but I remember watching it. Well, Walt Disney was that signature on the top of the thing. He wasn't a man, but he's not a signature. He's a man, and I think that's. So I'm surprised when people are like, "What?" I'm leery of saying. I hope somebody stands up and screams out, because now that I'm saying that on YouTube, someone's like, "Oh,
it's gonna happen in the next show."
Yeah.
For
all
sure.
right, of course, because now that I've said it. But in all honesty, it would be. I did have someone in the audience. The first preview, second preview, said to me, Mr. Disney, I hear you don't like my people. Jewish guy. And I was like, haha, no, hold on, I have to go take care of something. And just walked away from it. And I think that's how you deal with it when people say weird things to Walt.
Yeah.
Because with all the audience interaction at the beginning, people do say weird things to me. Even if it's calling me by my name, kind of like 4 times today. I was like, what is wrong with you?
I think it's also a daytime thing.
Yeah, probably. But I think if somebody has a really strong reaction to it, I think it's like take a little time and look. People are people. People make human mistakes.
Yeah, it's an extension, with this Me Too movement. It's an extension of I think, an ongoing conversation that's always happening in theater as things like this come out, which is how do we separate the bad behavior from the art of a person, and should we? And should we let somebody's legacy of stepping on people or of hurting people or whatever it is fall by the wayside because they've done so many important things? Or is that worth critical examination? And is it worth, acknowledging that our brilliant artists are also human and their art doesn't make them better than everyone else?
And the flip side of that is, does their legacy of stepping on people and hurting people, does that invalidate the art that they
No.
made? And yeah.
I think it goes back to kind of what you opened with in the first question of he is a legendary figure, he is a genius, he's a visionary. He has, in many ways, changed the world, as Walt strives to in the play. But he's a human being, and I think ultimately that's what Hnath wanted to explore. I want to look at, even if it's to some degree a fictional telling, I want to look at the human behind this myth.
All right, we'll end with that.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great play. If
Thanks for
anyone
coming.
gets a chance to see this, definitely come out, and posting this hopefully will drive a few people to come out. I know my fans of my videos are gonna, if they get a real kick out of this play.
Good.
Come on down, you get the best seat in the house.